Actually, that's a good point.
Live, live, live. Cheers, wifey. According to this, I'm not live. I guess it didn't connect properly, which wouldn't surprise me. Where's the chat as well? Chat's over here. Da, 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 da,
Oh, it
da.
says you're live on my thing.
Oh, is it up and running? No, I'm still not getting it on my. Are you talking about YouTube? Oh, no,
Yeah.
I am. No, I am. No, I have it. 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 I have it.
Right, let me check.
Silly, silly YouTube. All right, so now I'm up and running. On my one, let me make a few changes. Like, make sure I'm being paid. I refuse. I refuse to open my mouth until I'm being paid. What was it called? Oh my God, Mihal, how are you this morning? I never asked how are you keeping. How are you doing?
No, I'm fine now. 2 weeks of absolutely feeling like hammered hell.
Why?
Uh, I just rough. I think I had do you know what? I think I had a strain of the Rona. Um, whatever that may be. But it knocked me for six for basically 2 weeks. So
Is that the new plague running around Europe? Is it the
yeah,
Rona virus?
yeah, the new variant or something. I don't know. I don't keep track of it anymore. But
Yeah.
yeah, whatever it was, it knocked me down good. I lost my voice pretty much for 2 weeks. And I've
Oh.
only just started feeling better the last couple of days. So
Mm.
yeah, but apart from that, just now I'll get back into working on videos again,
Mm.
and then we'll go from there. And how's Japan? No tsunamis threatening to wipe you off the face of
Oh,
the earth.
hopefully not. Hopefully not. Jesus, fingers crossed it never happens. I don't want to be running for my life.
Thanks, Dennis.
Not like that at all. Yeah, yeah, yeah. What was it called? What would we call it this morning? I'm gonna rename my one just to improve the algorithm on my side because I reckon if it has two of them called the same name, it can be a bit cranky on YouTube side. My little theory. So I'll just call it the Persian dog or something. See if it works. 1 second.
I was trying to be all like, ooh, like along the Silk Road, ooh,
Yeah, it is nice. It is nice.
like we're walking along it, hand in hand, Philip.
Oh, right. That's changed now. Right. I'll pop over. How are you keeping Dennis? We have Dennis anyway. That's the main thing. We don't have anyone else in the chat, but at least Dennis is in the chat. How's Dennis this morning? Oh no, I'll drink of the old water. I
Do
tell
you
you,
know?
she's very slow this morning from the what was it called? Your side and my side. Maybe it was what was it called? Owen keeping our channels going.
um, I was trying to see uh, if I could link. Uh, yeah, t- TikTok. I've been trying to figure out about TikTok linking them across here, but it
Hmm.
doesn't allow editing of the live, even live when you're live. So I have no idea what to do with that. So sorry, TikTok. If there's anyone, let me just open up TikTok so I can see the
No.
chat.
How you keeping Jim? Any news, Jim? Have you lads been watching the news on the whole Iran stuff? How have you been watching it, Miha?
I went onto Wikipedia. I didn't even know it happened until you said, and then I was
Yeah, I
like,
know,
"What?
right?
What's happening?"
Yeah.
I always knew it was going to happen. It's been
Mm,
America's policy since before the Iraq War. Obviously, they've had their eyes on they had their eyes on Iraq, then
mm,
Iran, Korea. So these things are always going to happen eventually. So I've kind of been aware of it since I was like 11 years old.
yeah.
Since I'm even younger, 10 years old since 2003, since the Iraq invasion. So, um, but I just didn't know when it was going to happen, and obviously today, the 20th of February, was the day that it decided to happen. Well, I mean, it's been no formal declaration, obviously, but we see the first steps towards it, and I
Mm.
have no opinion. I know too little, care too little about anything apart from obviously civilian casualties and stuff like that.
Mm.
But the geopolitical side of it is really just, you never hear the whole story. So I just kind of just let the world do its thing.
Yeah. Sure. What else are you gonna be doing? Going off to go and get the potatoes from the back, and that's it. Like, what else can you do? Like, you know, same old, same old. Oh,
I
that's
don't
it, Jim. I've
I
been
don't
watching the
call it
news as well.
I don't call it
Huh?
American policy. I call it yammering. Yeah,
That's
look,
it. Like, I think Jim O'Neill hit the nail on the head there as well. Yeah.
at the end of the day, it's a politically charged subject. You'll have those who support Israel and America's policy on one side, and you'll have
Mm.
everyone else on the other side. And people get emotionally invested in a lot of things to do with Iran and Israel and America. And to be fair, we are just peasants.
Pawns.
And pawns and peasants fighting and arguing on behalf of people we don't know.
Yeah.
That we are drip fed and given propaganda about these people. OK magazines and YouTube videos to help us form opinions of these elite people above us. And we don't know them, so why do we get so emotionally charged defending whatever they're up to? I have no idea.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I always see that online where people are getting absolutely worked up for absolutely no reason. I'm like, Jesus Christ, like,
I just
is
live
that
by the
what?
attitude. I just live by the attitude that if you are a politician,
Mm.
and I understand that some politicians got into politics to change the world for better, but
Mm.
I'm of the opinion the minute you stand and you become an elected politician in whatever Senate, government, whatever, you're not a good person. That I just stand by that. I just look at it like immediately you're not a good person. You've probably had
Mm.
to stand on people. You've probably had to sell parts of your soul. You've probably taken massive steps away from what you joined politics for, and
Mm.
being chewed up by the machine. So I just look at you. I'm not saying they are not good people. I just look at them in the mindset of they're not good people, and I just
Yeah,
that's. It doesn't matter what party. Doesn't matter what party. Doesn't matter
yeah.
what politics. Doesn't matter if they're part of the, save the world. Everybody gets free healthcare and food, and
Mm.
children will live happily ever after. Um, there's probably there's probably some underdealings, some oil tycoons funding you somewhere. I just
That's it. No, no Owen tonight. Did the
just
straight Israeli rocket hit him? Yeah, probably. I hope not. Anyway.
nah, Israel wouldn't dare.
Yeah, it was. Owen was sending me us
I mean,
messages last night, but I didn't get around to read. My brain was half asleep because I was just getting into bed when I was reading his messages. What happened to Owen again, Michal?
he's got a family thing going on at the minute,
Yeah.
unfortunately. So a member of the family's not well, so he's just going to see them, and then he's got other commitments as well. So um,
Mm.
with his immediate family. I believe he's talked about it on here before, so I don't think he'll mind me mentioning about it. Like his daughter's got a football tournament and stuff. So,
Mm.
yeah, he's just very busy. He had hoped he might get on, and I never know, he might appear. Um,
Yeah.
but for the most part, yeah. But no stray Israeli missile.
Mm.
Like I said,
Not yet. Anyway, I hope
they
not.
wouldn't. They wouldn't dare try and strike Owen.
Yeah. I changed the background there to a Persian carpet. Do you like my Persian carpet there? Or do you
Oh,
think it's not Persian enough?
that's really nice. I've changed my background to my. This for anyone who's wondering. It's the sleeve of Gullion, and it's in South Ulster, and
Mm.
it's You're looking at my ancestral homeland. This is where my ancestors protected their cattle
Mm.
from the monster eaters. And it's also linked to Cuchulainn and so all that sort of thing. So Sleeve of Gullion is where Ulster's often defended itself from you boys down south coming up and thinking you can rule the place.
That's it, isn't it? Didn't you guys again and again and again during the Troubles use Cucullum Satanta as a symbol of resistance, wasn't it?
Both
Especially with
sides.
the
No,
yeah,
both. So if you go to East Belfast, you'll see. Actually, this will quite play quite nicely into our Persian talk as well.
yeah. Go on, go
Because I have a link.
on.
Yeah, no, both sides. So loyalist groups in Northern Ireland or the north of Ireland, whatever you want to call it. They were used. They both used Cuchulainn as a symbol. Same way they both used the red hand. Cuchulainn is sort of falls in line with they use him. He is an Ulster hero who fights off Southern aggression
Mm,
into Ulster. So they used that symbolism as well to sort of take their stand. As obviously as loyalists, that they are Ulster people taking a stand against Irish aggression into their native homeland.
mm,
Um,
mm.
so yeah, so both sides did it, obviously, but the yeah, but it falls in nicely. We were about like we wanted to talk a wee bit about uh, um, Persia. I forgot what we were
All right.
talking about for a second. And there's a I always love that there's actually the story of Cuchulainn,
Mm,
and one of his parts of his story, obviously he goes across the Isles in Scotland, uh, beats a woman warrior in
mm,
single-handed combat, Aoife, and takes her forcefully as his prize for beating her in single combat,
mm.
and she bears him a son,
Yeah.
Conla or Conla, depending on your pronunciation. Obviously, he goes back to Ireland, back to Ulster, does whatever. Conla grows up and is goes to Ulster to find his father, but Aoife puts a guise on him and says, "You can't tell, um, you know, Cuchulainn who you are, no matter
Mm,
what." So they end up going. They end up fighting. Just the story so happened to have it, and Cuchulainn strikes Conla with his spear, the Gay Bolg, and
mm,
obviously mortally wounds him. And it's only then he finds out that Conla is his son.
yeah.
There's a very, very similar story in Persian mythology from Rostam.
Yeah.
Rostam has a son called Sorab. Now he doesn't know Sorab ever exists, and Sorab doesn't know that Rostam is his dad right up until the end. But they again have a duel. Theirs lasts over several days, uh,
Mm,
and then it's only when Rostam kills his son Sorab or mortally wounds him on his deathbed that
mm,
we find out in the story that it's actually his son, and it's not the only comparison in the story. There's a lot of like overlaps.
mm,
Um, I've always been of the theory. I've never really researched it, but I've always been of the theory that this story of Cuchulainn and this story of Rostam is
mm.
proto-Indo-European. It's thousands of years old, and I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's a story that has been taken with humans as we migrated across the Mediterranean into Ireland. I think this story is older than Ireland, and
Yeah.
Cuchulainn is just placed in the location that he's in at the time when the story is being written down.
Mm,
But I believe it has way earlier roots, because of just it's not the only place it's found. Very similar stories are found in Greece.
mm,
Very similar stories are found all throughout. Um, you know, there's other areas as well, but all basically along the migratory path of the Indo-Europeans, which I
mm,
always
mm.
find very interesting.
Yeah.
Is that Rostam you've got there? Is that I've never actually seen a picture.
Yeah, that's the Sassanids there I have a picture of. But yeah, you're completely right as well. The Indo European link is something that we're doing further, more and more study into. And it is quite interesting because you're not the only person who has compared culture over in India to culture in Ireland. For example, cattle raiding culture and the worship of cows, both in India and Ireland, is quite interesting to study. And also, on top of that, as well, there's a good few key words that are found in Irish that can also be found in Indian languages as well. Obviously, I'm not linguistic, so I don't specialize in finding the similarities between the two. But it does seem to be that the movement of people that was happening around the steppes, nomadic, I think the probably believe it most likely was the Scythians or one of those nomadic groups, perhaps had an influence going from around the steppe areas over to Turkey and then over into Europe and eventually over to Ireland, perhaps, or even through North Africa up to Ireland. And then that same nomadic group probably went over to India as well and had those various shared traits, perhaps. It's always a theory. And if that theory is true, probably links us with the Russians as well, because I think some people reckon that the Scythians and stuff are one of the earliest groups that went into Russia as well. So it's interesting. And DNA evidence seems to be pointing to an Indian, was it an Indo-European group as well? So genetically seems to be connected. It seems to be also connected through shared culture and the shared, an earlier shared language that definitely seems to have an evolution and link. The only problem I'm having is that people who specialize in genetics seem to just keep chucking the word Celtic around the place, which is an absolute nightmare for myself because you'll try to explain how there's no kind of Celtic DNA link between Gaul and Ireland around 300 BC. And then suddenly people will start turning around and says, "Oh, yes, there is," and they'll start throwing these articles that highlight a DNA connection with Ireland and the rest of Europe that's set around 2300 BC or earlier than that. And they were like, "Yes, there is. This is the Celtic people," and then they'll start sharing, Belbeaker people DNA, various other Indo-European DNA structures instead of the Celtic people of 300 BC. So it can be quite funny like that. I don't know if you've been studying recent DNA. Oh, you seem to get delighted there.
No, no. I mean, no. It's not just that. I mean, I often my work as looking at clans and dynasties, obviously,
Mm,
well, it's more of a modern thing, really.
mm,
But a lot of obviously clan groups have started to merge or create their own DNA groups within
mm,
sort of like FTDNA and Find My Ancestry. There's a lot of push for linking them together, and I mean it's problematic at this in an Irish and Scottish Gaelic sort of sense because
mm,
obviously surnames are not polygenetic, so
mm,
not everyone from not like a Doyle like myself, not every Doyle would have been a Doyle. It would have been although people find it hard to understand that it's almost very in its early essence is it's almost like a little micro nation within a wider nation.
mm,
So rather than like a specific genetic link. So yeah, I often come across articles that try to either enhance or diminish lineages of certain lines and people, and and that often gets the problem with that is a lot of it I think has to do with people are doing it to push their own agendas. Whether that be a specific pure Celtic race or
mm,
whether that be whatever that they're trying to promote, and that they're never really promoting the full picture. I think if anyone turns around and says a pure anything, then single thing, then that's not a good thing.
mm,
It's um, but you know, there's been so a lot of people, a lot of research. Obviously, those the finds up in Rathlin, those uh, bodies found under the pub that are had step DNA in them,
mm.
uh, you know, um, and people try to promote that as the ancient Milesian story, where they come over and I
Wow,
can't remember if it's the Tuatara and Milesians where they come over. They're not
it
the
is.
Picts. They come over, but they're not allowed to settle in Ireland, So they give them some wives and send them across to Scotland and say you can live there. Um, you know, Obviously we know this is just mythology, and it's not taken as historical fact.
Mm,
But the fact that there's an overlap, people obviously get a bit excited by that. But no one ever
yeah,
denies the overlap. We all know that most of myth has a grain of truth in it. They're built on foundations of truth. They are
mm,
records of migrations. They're just simplified stories for people to pass on. Uh, you know, that we come from somewhere else, or that we did this, or we did that. And then they're embellished to make them interesting. Um,
yeah,
so yeah, but the main point is, yeah, there's not really anything new coming out at the minute.
mm,
Pretty much anything that's sort of been found over the last sort of 5 years is pretty standard. That, yeah, there was multiple migrations into Ireland from Belgica groups. From we are part of the same wave of migration. We are no different to the rest of Europe. The
mm,
same groups that inhabited Europe and pushed into Europe from, you know, from the what's called modern day Ukraine area, and pushed into Ireland. Europe also pushed into Ireland.
mm.
So we're part of a wider European genome. And we're all related in some way, some
Mm.
more distantly than others. So
Boo, 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 boo. You can get what's the major difference? One of them is more of a unified term. No, I'm not
folk
linguistic.
hang,
James going deep down the linguistic pothole.
I just want to.
But,
Sorry, I just want to jump in there. And some
but
folk punk just went, "Nah, it's true. I met a Milesian last week. He's a good lad, fine worker." I
yeah,
hear they're lazy and always on the dole.
but just to get over and answer
Yeah.
James' question there, once more of kind of from my interpretation of the what was it called linguistic part, and I'm not linguistic now, so you guys will probably tear me apart on this one, but one of them's more or less talking about Ireland as a whole. I find anything that to with, and once again, if you guys want to tear me apart on this one, you're more than welcome to do so, but one of them in anything to do with era, it's more or less you're born on the island of Ireland, where Gael, in my opinion, is more of the native people of Ireland, the actual original Irish people. And the reason why I say that is that when you have the arrival of, the men of Luckland, the Norwegians, onto the island of Ireland around the ninth century, that's where you start to see a change in language, where they're no longer just identifying the kings of Ireland, or no longer just identifying themselves as King of the Gael. They're also recognizing themselves as the King of Era. And I'm like, why would they do that suddenly? Why would they have a sudden change of language? And I do believe it's because they see themselves as not just the kings of the native Irish, the Gael, but they also see themselves as kings of these new foreigners coming in here, that they're getting tribute by these people and they're subjugating these people as well. So they see themselves now as the king of Era, the king of Ireland itself, or the territories inside of Ireland, because Ireland rightfully belongs to the Gael and the people of Ireland. So that's why I see themselves now as anybody who's living here, you're more than welcome to live here, but you need to play by the rules. And I think that's kind of what they're saying when they're recognizing themselves as Era. But, that's just my interpretation of it. She's a fine map, isn't she? I found this map. It's an earlier map from 550, but it gives you a really good idea of the Persian Empire. And why the Persians are so protective of this territory of the Silk Road, going from India all the way over to what was it, Babylon? What was it? The Greek territories
What are you
up
looking?
around there. What's that?
You're talking about Byzantium.
Yeah, Byzantium. That's the one.
Yeah.
Because it's a constant team up around the Byzantine Empire. But this one's also very interesting as well because it's got the Scythians in there that I kept butchering early on and I kept tripping over. But yeah, there they are there, the nomadic group. But there's a lot of arguments and debates. I think Dr. Dermot Scully was making the argument as well that there's a good chance we're related to this group here. But it's this group here that also has a DNA that reappears as well with modern day Russians, so there could be a link between the Irish and Russians to this nomadic group here. And you see, this is one of the problems because the the Persians, sorry, have various settlements throughout here. You can see all the settlements that they have going on here. But the problem is that these are big open areas, as you can imagine yourself, all those big open desert areas. Obviously, not every part of Persia is desert, but there's these big open areas in between where you're coming from India, you've got yourself a nice little wagon because you're a merchant, and you're going to this settlement, and then you're going to go off here to this settlement. And you see, in between, then you're open to constant attack. Now, if we jump forward all the way up to around the 5th century AD, one of the most famous groups of all was the confederation of nomadic groups called the White Huns, who are coming down from what is modern day Mongolia and up around those areas and stuff, and they came in there and used to wreck up this entire area and used to target specifically wagons. Why? Because they came in with all the goods that were coming from India, vice versa. A whole load of trade goods coming from, if we were talking about the medieval period, the Byzantine Empire. All those trade goods coming over and trying to make their way over to India. So you constantly, throughout the medieval period, had constant attacks by nomadic groups. And even here today, in 550, or even early on in the ancient period, you can imagine Scythians coming in here and attacking the wagons coming in and out. So constant attack between them. Nomadic groups, Mihal, what do you know
Yeah.
about nomadic groups?
Well, I know this is obviously now. I don't know if this is what you meant really, but I'm just going to clarify it anyway, just to make sure. When you say we're related to the Scythians, you're not saying we're descended from Scythians.
To be honest with you, I don't know.
I have the answer for this, but I
Go
just
on,
wanted to
go on,
make
go on.
sure that you weren't, and then you'd be like, so. Actually, obviously, like I say, this is the Scythians are where the Milesian myth comes from first. They start from Scythia, then they make their way across to Spain, and then they go to Ireland. That's where they. And this is why I was saying about the foundations of truth. But yes, we're not related from the Scythians, but we're related to the same Indo-European common ancestor. I
Yeah.
believe it's the R1b. I can't remember the subclades, but the R1b paternal genetic genome is very prevalent in Ireland. I think 80% of Irish people have it. And the Scythians would have had a large population of that too. So we have a shared common ancestor who would have been from the Scythians didn't really. They migrated down to that area, the Caspian area there. They migrated down from what is, I believe, the area is within the modern day state of Ukraine. That seems to be where the Belbeaker people sort of came from. What we're talking about there is basically, so what you have there is 2,500 years ago. That map is 2,500 years old, 540 BC. But it's another 2,000 years back that we would actually have probably been related. 1,500, 2,000. They never give specific dates. It's always between 1,500, 2,000.
Yeah.
But it's a Bronze Age. It's a Bronze Age steppe people that the Irish definitely would descend from with this R1b genetic group. So we have that link. We have that lineage. We definitely come from a steppe people. A large percentage of us do in a paternal state, but we're also interbred married in 5,000 years and so into that. You could basically say every Irish person, you know, relates back to this group. So yeah, um, uh,
So
um,
basically, a Russian is what you're saying.
well, I wouldn't ever dare put a modern title on top of an ancient
Mm-hmm.
group. You end up falling into that problem, don't you? Where you end up sort of you try to give Persians the title Iranians, you
Mm.
know, when they would never have referred to themselves as
Yeah.
Iranian. And the fact that we can even see there on that map, you know, that their borders far extended, you know,
Mm.
further than Iran. Um, and actually, to be fair, a lot of Persian families became nobility in Armenia and
Mm.
became part of the Armenia. The Armenian class system is really interesting, but it's far too
Cool.
deep for a conversation now. Yeah, they have a really interesting class system, but um, a lot of a lot of their families came paternal descent
Mm.
from Persian royalty. So
Mm.
you know, you have I think I'll only be end up butchering it, but the Cyrenaic and the Pahlav are two groups that I can think of that have these links back to kings of Persia. So you know, um, but they would be so integrated. They would be the Anglo Normans of Armenia. You know, they could become so integrated. They'd probably become more Armenian than the Armenians themselves.
Mm.
So, but yeah, uh, that's what I'm saying. So, there's a you were looking for Bronze Age set migration. Yamna, the Yamnaya culture. That's correct. That's
Mm.
um, one of the groups. I shall claim no Russian blood.
Jim, you're Russian now, and that's that.
Let's not group everyone together. There's millions of people in Russia, lots of subgroups, lots of you know, same with Persia, you know, like and Iran. You know,
Mm.
Iran today is a mostly Shia country, but there's Zoroastrians, there's Druze, there's, you know, all these groups that have been there's groups that have links to the, you know, Assyria and have been there even longer than Persia, for heaven's sake, you know. So,
Mm.
you know, let's not lump all everyone together just on a because everyone else tries to, maps try to, politicians try to, but um, I think it's what these little differences in our societies that make for a better interesting than this homogenous idea of we're all British, we're all American, we're all, you know,
Mm.
it's too bland, too boring. Keep us keep us feisty. Yeah, and yeah, maybe means maybe your bosses don't run on time because our politicians are too busy arguing, but you know, who cares?
Mm. It's a difficult conversation to have. Why? Because that whole step migration, that's constant movement. I'm quite ignorant to how it is all today, of course, but during the medieval period, geez, Yuki has the coffee all the way up to the very tip, up to the very edge of it. I'm like, Jesus, Yuki,
Here,
she's
Yuki,
balancing it perfectly.
pour some of
But
that in that, will you? Oh, you can't use my cup.
But the whole thing about the step migration, from my perspective, and anytime I try to study it personally myself, it can be very, very blurry. Why? Because you have all these, groups constantly mixing around and moving around and everything up around that area and stuff, and constantly going from one group into another group, and then having these confederations coming together, breaking away when the man with the biggest stick is gone, then making another confederation over here, and then you have another group making another confederation over there, and every once in a while, they come together and they come over and start smashing into this area and start attacking these poor Persian wagons and stuff. It is massively, massively very interesting. But when you try to go into further research from my perspective, it can be very confusing. I don't know if you have the same experience yourself, Mihal, when looking into these various nomadic groups up around the steppe area.
Yeah, because it runs into the same problem that we run in when we study Celtic history. You know,
Mm-hmm.
people are merged together into these nice, neat names, um, or drew within these defined borders
Mm.
of a country like on your map.
Yeah.
And it's if anything, it's ever taught us, history's ever taught us, there's never clean lines in a map.
Mm.
There's never, none of it's ever neat and in a box. Nobody, like we've constantly argued, the Irish never would have considered themselves Celtic or
Mm.
called themselves Celtic. It's a modern term, and and again, when we apply these terms, these Bell Beaker terms, the Bell Beaker culture, so we end up envisioning this single group who have
Mm.
spread across Europe. The Yamna, who I believe are the ones that who are their predecessors who invented the
Mm.
cart, which is why they were able to move, vast distances. I believe is the technological advancement attributed to them.
Mm.
Problem with that is these groups within the Bell Beaker group, you had all these clans, you had all these tribes, you had all these
Mm.
families, you had all these who this little probably mini kingdoms, all these things that um but we just can't see them the same way we can see medieval Ireland, the same way we
Mm.
can see medieval Europe. So yeah, I would say I do fall into the trap very easily. I think it's a very common thing to do, but because of how limited the information we have and how
Yeah.
simplified the information is that we're being given, uh,
Mm.
that it's very easy to then put perspectives I already have on medieval Europe backwards, projecting backwards. It's something that I tell people not to do with modern politics, but really I'm forgetting to do it with medieval politics even further back.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I do it too. And I, like I said, it's not even my area of study, so as well. So it's very easy for me to do, um, uh, as a whole. Someone was saying that, oh, Jim, I have a Bible that has a map and says that we are the bloodline of Noah's son Japheth. Um, I don't want to get into that.
Go on, Neil.
Well, I'm just gonna
But I joined my shovel there. Yeah.
I'm just going to say it flat out. There's no archaeological evidence or genetic evidence linking the Irish
Mm.
to the historic, the Japheth. Um, you know, Biblical sort of figures are part of that, theological narrative. They're not traceable prehistoric individuals. So, um, I'm going to say, we know Irish medieval, and scholars were often rewriting texts to fit narratives, and we know that our Eastern possible cousins were doing the same thing. It's not new. The Bible has changed many times, um, and it has been interpreted
Mm.
many times. I am not one that ascribes to the theory of the 12 tribes of Israel. But it'd be interesting. Where are the Persians? What are they? Get your map out and see where the Persians are on that. uh,
The Persians. Yeah, 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 yeah. And it's interesting, all right. There is some form of movement that's happening from North Africa to Spain and then on to Ireland. And there is a few academics that do believe so far about the movement of the Malaysians going from what was it, Spain, Iberian Peninsula, as it was called back in the day, over to Ireland. And then you do have a whole load of connections during this golden age that was happening during the Bronze Age. A lot of similarities in archaeological finds happening both in Ireland and over in especially northern Spain, which you can see straight away if you were to walk into the National Museum of Ireland. You can see all those finds right away. There's so many of them found all over Ireland. There's no doubt that there's some form of a there. A lot of people nickname it the Celtic Ibar. And it's definitely something of interest to definitely do further research and study into, um, especially when we have endless amount of finds in Ireland, like or the Irish Celtic history for sure. Definitely look into this Celtic Iberian history. during the Bronze Age. And for me, it's definitely probably the easiest link you can find there between the Scythians and all these other groups that are coming over. And it definitely consists to do further research into. It's interesting, and it definitely gives Ireland a higher perspective of the wider world, um, and our links to it, especially when you have all this migration happening up around the steppe region, and how it connects us into this constant attacking as when you have the common little merchant and his wagon trying to make it from India all the way over to what we refer to later on as the Holy Lands. And as Jim was pointing out there, our connection with the Bible and everything that's going on there. So you're not a fan of the old biblical version of it, Mihal, but you're more of a fan of what can be proven with the DNA at the hard
Um,
evidence, which seems to connect us more to. Would you would
yeah,
you
yeah. So
agree with that?
I don't ascribe to the biblical sort of narrative put forward of the sort of 12 tribes of
Mm,
Israel scattered. I don't ascribe to the Milesian
mm,
story promoted in the like I can't even pronounce it. The fucking the Book of Invasions. There we go. I'll go for the English
mm,
variation of it. I don't prescribe to that either. And that's because, like I say, genetic evidence doesn't promote mass migration from Spain into Ireland in the late Bronze Age or Iron Age. There's no mass migration from Spain into Ireland at that time period. Um, what is ascribed in genetic evidence is yes, we have European movement from possibly Spain and mainland Europe and through uh, Britain into Ireland, early Bronze Age.
mm,
So you're talking thousands of years ago. Um, uh,
mm,
what a, Obviously, some people do ascribe the Milesian story and the biblical stories and stuff like that as sort of Bronze Age memory.
mm,
And I can sort of get on board with that because we've already touched on it with Rostam and Cuchulainn. There does seem to be these grains of like memory passed on, these nuggets of information that are taken with our ancestors and then re-embellished and reinvented, but still at the very core retain
mm,
this Indo-European or whatever previous group um, link, and that's interesting to me. But at the same time,
mm,
I know that there's a lot of like Owen will often debate the Milesian argument as well, believing that it's mostly 16th century. Not like it's promoted primarily later on to link us to Spain for political reasons, to
mm.
align ourselves with Spain, especially during the Tudor conquest of Ireland.
Yeah.
So we can see
Mm.
how stories are manipulated and twisted each century,
Embellished. Yeah.
depending on what and embellished depending on
Mm,
what's happening. So I will, but even then, I just want to add this. It's funny because in doing so that each generation has maybe embellished a story too, or changed the story to fit a narrative, to fit to do something, to build a story, to build a pond, to build a connection, and it's done that. We have a really great connection with Spain, and especially
mm.
the uh oh, who's the group in northern Spain? ETA was their terrorist organization. Do you want to?
Oh, I have no idea what's the name of it.
Basque, the Basque
Ah,
people.
right, right, right.
Yeah, right.
Mm,
We have a great connection with them, like modern day, the Celtic nations, a lot of
mm,
groups coming together with Wales and Scotland and Brittany and Basque people, and really good, really great to see these sort of interconnecting and finding commonality, and I think they're really, really interesting, and building a new narrative, a new story, but
mm.
doesn't mean we have to, really fall into some of the nonsense that it is built upon. But I still find them interesting, is what I'm saying. Basque. Thank you, Dennis. Yeah, I didn't know it
Yeah,
was Spaniards. Yeah, do you know what? My best friend for all through school was Basque, and he would be going mad at me if he's watching this right now.
yeah, yeah. Because
Young
the thing of right
girls,
now is the likes of the what was it? The likes of the Galatians. What was it? Give me a second there, because my brain is still turning on as well. Celtic map Spain, and it is Galatians. I am right. It was Galatians. Bum, bum, bum. The Basques I can never think of, to be honest with you. But I do know, I am aware of the other Celtic links that we have in there, because it's still today. I don't know if they still speak any of the Celtic languages in modern day Iberian Peninsula, but there definitely is an ancient language that's there that the linguistics and stuff study. And it's the same thing with that whole Brittany link. But I think what was it, Wales and Cornwall is more linked with Brittany in France, although we still have a great medieval connection with Brittany. Linguistically, I think they're more connected with Wales and Cornwall. But
yes.
Ireland and Scotland has more of a linguistic connection with the Iberian Peninsula. So I always look to the Galatians in particular, just three other groups there, but I always personally always look to the Galatians before I get into anything else. But I'm not, just to highlight once again, I'm not linguistic, more of a historian than anything else. To be quite honest with you, lads. Um, what about the Ulster cycles? About the other. What about the Ulster cycles?
So I'm guessing Thummercore is talking that. So right, this is really interesting, right, and it actually kind of ties into what you were saying before about so the Welsh Pictish groups are P Celtic speaking people.
Mm,
And the Irish, the Goidelic, the Gaels are Q Celtic speaking people, and so are sort of some of the northern Spain, some of the parts of northern Spain. That's where their language comes from, Q Celtic,
mm,
and the reason it's given Q and P uh, uh, sort of titles is because um, the word clan,
mm,
clan became clan. In Welsh, it's like plan. It's
mm,
plan. So yeah, that's why it's given the so the what would be the k sound is more of a p sound in Brythonic languages, and um, so that's how it splits. Right. Anyway, so but they're all part of the wider Indo-European tree. Right. But the Ulid, or not the Ulid per se, the title of Ulid, the groups like the Dal and Clan Ruri, they are said to have been part of the P Celtic people. So they were there in Ulster. The argument is by some individuals that they were there in Ulster before the Gaels, before the Q
mm.
Celtic people were speaking in there.
Yeah.
So they were there about 200, 300 years before the Gaels arrived. So therefore, this narrative has often been used to promote that Ulster is British, has always been British because Britons were in Ulster beforehand. Not only is that problematic
Mm,
because we don't actually know when Q Celtic came into Ireland, we only know when it was first
mm,
written down. And it's first written down 300
mm,
years afterwards. We don't really know when it was when it first arrived. There's arguments that it goes
mm,
right back to the Bronze Age, or variations of it go right back to the Bronze Age. And not only that, but the Ulid, not the Ulid, the Clan Naraja, no, Dal Naraja, sorry, are always recorded as speaking Q Celtic, always well established within the Gaelic system of kingship. At no point are they ever seen as a continuation of these Pictish groups. There's no link between them apart from maybe a distant genetic link of the same group that migrated with the Picts, that came up and became the Picts, also went across to Ireland, but
mm,
they were never part of the Pictish cultural group. They never took part in anything that you would sort of associate with Brittonic groups across Ireland. So it's a kind of problematic thing to associate them with Britons or Brittonic people when they were never involved in that. Now there are individuals like Comgall King, who said it to be Comgall is said to have been king of the Picts, and Cruithne. The term Cruithne, is a term applied by Irish monks to the Picts in Scotland, but it's also used to describe a group in Ireland, and therefore
mm,
people. Well, that must mean they're the same group, but we see it all the time that the Irish writers are using words in multiple ways for multiple meanings for multiple things. Doesn't mean
mm,
that they're ever saying these are the same people, and we can see that because they also write about them separately too. Um, so yeah, it's a really sort of like it just goes back to, like I say, these Celtic people are trying there's groups who try to weaponize this migration into Ulster to legitimize British colonialism of Ireland, especially Ulster.
mm,
And that's again the problem with projecting backwards. Like I say, these people would never um, these people who would then become the Ullid or adopted
mm.
the Ullid. This is such a big question, like a big thing. I don't even know where to start because I end up starting in the bloody middle. But because Ullid again is a term that's been used to mean different things. Ullid
Mm,
meant uh, uh, a group of people from Ulster, but it was used by a totally different group. This is a proto
mm,
Bronze Age group. This term Ullid. I can't remember the original term. It's like Ullagia or something. Um,
mm,
then the Dal na Raja appear in medieval manuscripts. Then the Dal Fiatuk,
mm,
who are a Q Celtic speaking people from Ulster, appear.
mm,
So you've got these two groups competing for Ulster, to be kings of
mm,
Ulster. Um, and the Dalfia took adopt the term Ullid as the people of Ullid, and the Dal na Raja then start writing in medieval manuscripts. No, we're the true Ullid, and that's what they refer to themselves as, the true Ullid. Although the Dalfiatic have been using the title of being called the Ullid for far longer, but the Dal na Raja are now fed up
mm.
with the fact that the Dalfiatic are doing this. So you can just see how terms change, how terms um, are used and weaponized and to propagate cause and it's the whole thing's just a mess.
Awesome. That's what it is. It is awesome stuff.
Uh,
Just getting back to the conversation at hand, though, the Galatians, you guys are right. The Galatians do move into Turkey around, isn't it, the 5th and 4th century BC? They move into Turkey, the Galatians do. They were a branch of the French God, and they had gone into the Turkish area. They had physically taken territory originally up around here. I don't know if you can zoom out or not, Mihal, for the wider scale on my map. But yeah. But here, so the Galatians come in here, wrecking the place up, taking territory and stuff, and they end up settling around here in the center area. What's very interesting about the Galatians is that what we know of the Galatians today is actually in the Bible. Funny enough, the Galatians actually pop up in the Bible and they get a few words in there because the Galatians are actually convert to Christianity. So, because of that, there's a good few entries of the Galatians inside the actual Bible itself. So, where the Irish read the Bible and go, hey, wait a minute, where are we in this? And then go off and write the Book of Invasions to include themselves into the Bible. The Galatians themselves, the branch that breaks away from Gaul, actually settled themselves into Turkey. where they set up a protection racket actually in this area. They sell themselves off as mercenaries and even become mercenaries with the Egyptians. The Galatians have a amazing relationship with the Egyptians and even become bodyguards for the pharaohs and stuff in that region, and become very successful because where all the other mercenaries that go into the Egyptian area and become bodyguards for the pharaohs end up kind of stabbing them in the back and usurping them, the Galatians don't have the same reputation and become amazing bodyguards, not just for the Egyptians, but for various other groups as well. So the Galatians, very, very successful in that area and very, very successful as mercenaries for the various groups in that area. And instead of becoming completely wiped out, they actually successfully, because of the fact that they're able to play off the various groups in that area, which is quite funny because most of the time when people look at Celtic groups, they always look at the Celts and go, "Poh, the Celts always fighting each other, always divide and conquer." You go in there, you ally yourself with one Celtic group, you fight the other Celtic group. That's kind of what the Celts are known for, allegedly. Although everybody ends up, having internal fighting amongst themselves, it's the Celts who are most famous for it. In the case of Turkey, on the other hand, and the Galatians, it's the other way around. So the Galatians move in there and survive because of the fact that they played the role as mercenaries and are constantly middle ground between the various groups. So they survive until, as you guys are pointing out there, the Seljuk Turks arrive. So the Seljuk Turks arrive around this area, and they're another confederation of nomads led by Seljuk himself. And they go in there and start racking up the various areas of the Persian areas, and they end up settling around the area that the Galatians were settled in. And it's from that point onwards that I assume that's when the Galatian DNA just magically disappears. Because as you guys have pointed out, that Galatian DNA, it's not there today. It's completely obliterated. So what we know of the Galatians is only what we can see in the Bible, and then after that, they seem to just disappear. So we're not sure if they disappear because they're mixing in with Greek DNA, or if the Seljuk Turks go in there and completely wipe out that DNA itself. But that's, the annoyance of constant nomads coming into this area and smashing up and sometimes completely wiping out some DNA, or just mixing in with the other DNA in that area as well, and having this kind of bastard hybrid of movements that's coming in from these various steppe regions into the area. Any opinion on that, Michal,
No. My
before we
my
drive
I was
on?
just going to go into this afterwards, but my knowledge of the Galatians would probably not extend any more than what you've kind of said there, and that's actually probably more than I would know. I knew they existed. I think they were a mercenary group in Rome Total War. That it's basically about the height of my knowledge of the Galatians. So yeah, I kind of just gonna nod ahead with that one.
Nod and smile.
Yeah.
I love the Galatians. I think they're so
Oh
so
yeah. I mean,
interesting, but it is kind of depressing that they have disappeared.
well,
Like,
I mean, I think it's for a Celtic group to sort of survive in the middle of modern day Turkey on the Anatolia Peninsula, and also in Egypt is super interesting, but it's just not somewhere where I've probably gone further than the Wikipedia page. So I wouldn't think it'd be wise for me to weigh in. But I do know at least a little bit about this, so that's a good ring. Yeah. So, well, I'll just break down for anyone that's not aware. So, RM Trouble Two is mostly associated with the northwest. So that's the group that everyone sort of links to the Enil and Nile Nogalach, Nile of the Nine Hostages. The common ancestor of that. They kind of believe that the subclade of RM222. There's a subclade of that everyone sort of associates with the Nile of the Nine Hostages, whereas RZ 253 is mostly associated with Monster and Thomond, because that's the Dalkash sort of group, who are actually Dacia as well. So really they would
Mm.
have even further links to Waterford direction. Um, but
Yeah, yeah.
again, to associate these, I mean, technically, I've just done that, associate them with clans. I know the Dalkarsh lineage is expected to have RZ253 or its variation
Mm.
subclades, and anyone who's an Enel is expected to have the RM222 subclades. But I just want to again specify what I said earlier about clans not being polygenetic. A haplogroup uh, can be common in political dynasties territories, but it's not what defines the clan. A medieval
Mm.
sort of Irish dynasty were political king groups, but they're not like genetic isolates. They're, adoption, fosterage, illegitimacy, branch splitting, all of these sort of things sort of change the haplogroup within or haplogroups within a surname. Um, to have this
Mm.
idea of like pure genetic line of like I'm a Doyle, I must be descended from Dougal, Dougall, or the first of Dublin or whatever.
Mm.
It's
Mm.
not a concept to be having the same way. Not every Irishman or Englishman or Frenchman comes from a common French ancestor. They're a group. They are a conglomerate of people who speak French, who see
Mm.
these items as like the flag is their, as their heritage, their ancestry. It speaks for them, and that's the same way that surname
Mm.
should be associated with like a nation, like a country. Is in like my surname, my coat of arms. These are just symbols that link me to a smaller group of people, but it doesn't necessarily mean I'm, paternally genetically related to the same people, individuals they are. And it was never thought
Mm.
like that, really, unless you were within the noble Gelfina, about
Mm.
to become chieftain or Taoiseach or, Tánaiste or whatever. Then it became important. But for the most of the time, if I just says I'm a Doyle, then I'm under the protection of the Doyles, and they'll make sure my cattle are raided. I'll go make sure my neighbor's cattle are raided, you know, and we'll meet up at the fair in the summer, and hand each other's daughters across to each other.
Mm. 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 Yeah, that's it. I found a nice little photo of the Galatians in Egypt. All right, I remember that from years back because this was in my university textbooks and stuff. There's another one as well, but I always seen this image. So this is the Galatian mercenaries that were hired by the Egyptians, and they came over to Egypt to serve for the various pharaohs and stuff. And they got addicted to hiring them because they also not only exceptionally good bodyguards, but also on top of that as well, the Egyptians loved their super pale skin. So they became a massive thing of status for the Egyptians as well. So another photo of them there. Not sure where exactly this is meant to be, but that's the once again the Galatians there, butt naked as well, getting the old penis out. Used to be a tactic for the Celts to go into battle around this period, actually, around 500 BC to 300 BC. It was very effective for the trained warriors to get naked and then run exactly at ill disciplined formations because they used to see the big sausages of the Celts running directly at them and used to freak out and break formation. And so the Celts were able to smash into them. Not really a tactic I would use against a formation of spearmen that knew exactly what they were doing. But for people that didn't know what they were doing, peasants that didn't know what they were doing, it was actually quite effective. There's actually a good few recordings of the various Celtic factions using those formations to smash up peasants, well, lower class farmers who couldn't really hold the formation together. So this tactic, very effective between 500 BC to 300 BC, and then it kind of gets debatable if the Celts were still going into battle naked to break up various formations. Most of the time, you have them dressed in their mail. There you can see there. It was the Celts were one of the first earlier factions in the world to start using riveted mail. So you can see it there. Basically, what was it called, iron armor and stuff into battle and stuff, and it's the same thing here with the iron here as well. Some people would argue and debate that it was the people of Celtic culture in Gaul that first invented iron and stuff and started using it in battle. Compared to a lot of other people who are still using bronze, but I suppose that's very debatable and stuff. Cleopatra approves. Oh, aye, that's for sure.
um, yeah, Tom, yeah, yeah, for hereditary earners, and corbs and other hereditary roles, sure. Obviously, bloodline mattered. The closer you were to any political power. But
Mm,
for 90, that when you look at the population, 90% of people are the nobility make up a very small fraction of what is the population of an area. So most people wouldn't have cared. But they would have cared, but not in the way that you're thinking. They care
mm,
because like I say, they care the same way an Englishman cares about being English today, or an Irishman cares about being Irish. You know,
mm,
uh we are not all descended from the same people. We're not, but we have a shared unity behind certain symbols, behind certain ideals,
mm,
behind certain ideas. And an average person would have got behind that. You know, the idea that that cattle belongs to the Doyles. Am I biologically a Doyle?
mm,
No, but my father said he was a Doyle, and his father said he was a Doyle. So I'm going to protect the cattle of the chieftain of the Doyles. Whether we both descend from Donegal or not is irrelevant. I'm going to tell people I do in
mm,
battle because, you know, well, we've always said we are Doyles. You know, that's the kind of mindset you want to be thinking of. It's really just that simple. It's not so
mm,
weirdly. It's just symbolism. It's just propaganda, politics. It's just humans all through history. We haven't changed. The things that we get behind are just bigger now. They incorporate more. You're just seeing
mm,
it in its raw, formation of these nations, these countries, these, in our surnames, and it's just these little micronations of people linked behind, it could have been a tree, for God's sake, the sacred tree, and everyone just got behind it, and we all have the same name because that's, we're all Englishmen, we're all Irishmen, we're all Martians.
mm. Oh, it depends what political end game they're trying to do. It's even the fact that a lot of these lads are trying to rewrite their own history and trying to
Yeah,
take various kingships and stuff.
like,
For example, the Dal Cash and their connection to the wider world and stuff. Who knows who the Dal Cash are connected to, ancient wise? When they're pushing for the kingship of Ireland, as Brian Boru and all that kind of stuff. You can see it, and it's the same thing with various factions in Ireland. When they're pushing for the kingship as well during the early medieval period, and how they're trying to, and it's still a massive argument today. I think the recent one is the Killen Owen actually related to Niall of the Nine Hostages, um, because of the fact that you have so many factions in Ireland. Trying to write themselves into Niall of the Nine Hostages, and then even further back again with Con of the Hundred Battles. Some people would argue and debate that Niall of the Nine Hostages isn't connected to Con of the Hundred Battles. I'm not, by the way, before the comment section goes wild and tears me apart.
I'm quite
But
happy for the
go on.
O'Neills not to be. So yeah, you've touched on a point there that the O'Neill line may be illegitimate. It
Mm,
may descend from I, and everyone knows who's followed the talks for a long time, followed the channels. I'm more of a McLaughlin supporter anyway.
mm,
So well, I think that I'm more of a Dalfiatuk, but we're not getting into that. So yeah, but they think the O'Neills descend possibly from an illegitimate line, not so much as in like the father wasn't who's a. It's just
mm,
what was common was to claim parentage where it didn't exist. So to claim a father, no, look at the Norse sagas of kings suddenly being found, princes being found years later,
mm,
or they've been squirreled away and raised by hags and and pigs and wolves and Romulus and Remus. It's a
mm,
common story in human history. So yeah, and the O'Neills may be one of these, where I can't remember which first king it is, but he may not be descended from who he claimed to be descended from. But that,
Mm,
like you've stated, is not new in Irish history. Like you say, the O'Briens claim descent from the Owenach to claim kingship of Munster, but they're actually Dacia. You know,
mm,
they were from the Dacia Muin, I think it was, if I can remember rightly off the top of my head. Um,
yeah.
the O'Neill constantly, the Dal Naraja, this proto-Brittonic group or Brittonic group that we spoke about earlier, tried to
Mm,
claim descent from the Kilnoan. They tried to claim descent from Niall and Nine Hostages. They rewrote their history. The O'Rourke's and the O'Reillys did such a good job of rewriting their history. We don't actually even know who they're descended from. They claim to be
mm,
descended from Brion of the Ebruin or the Ebreen. That we can see where they tipexed their names out and put their new name in. We can see that, but we don't know what who they tipexed out. We have no idea
mm,
who they're related to. But they claimed they're Ebreen and Brefna, and and we know they're not, but we've no idea. They did such a good job of covering it up. Um,
mm.
but yeah, so it's not new. It's not new in Irish history. Oh,
Yeah.
in any history, like you said, the Europeans. It was for a while. It was really interesting for like families to claim to antiquity. There's princes of Rome called the Massimo family, and
Mm,
they claim a descent from a Maximus who was a senator in the Roman Republic,
mm.
and that's where they get their name from. Um, you know, it's not new. It's not new.
No, no, it's not. Sadly, it happens right away. Clan, yeah, yeah. I think it is very, very fascinating. All right, and it is also very fascinating how many links we have with the Silk Road and that movement that was happening. Like it seems to be the majority of that movement going from the nomadic steppes past Persia, which it really does highlight the fact of why Persia is so important, especially that movement going from India over to the Byzantine Empire. At the very start of the medieval period, as we go into the early medieval period, Persia is ran by the Sassanid dynasty. I don't think the Sassanid dynasty themselves have any links with Ireland whatsoever, but
No.
it's interesting that we do have all that movement. I think it's probably at this point, the way we're talking, there seems to be, it's actually very surprising that there isn't a single clan that didn't turn around. This is actually, I'm related to the Sassanid dynasty. I'm actually Persian. The way that all the other groups seem to be connecting to everybody else in those regions. But regardless, you do have the Sassanids who dominated the Persian and the movement going from India to the Byzantine Empire for quite some time until around 651, where we see the rise of Islam and the Prophet Muhammad suddenly arising in that region to suddenly gobble up a whole load of territory. And that would be the rise of the Arabs into that region, pushing back against the Persians and creating that long rivalship that we even see today between the Arabs and Persians. Because it's very, very easy today, especially with Western propaganda, to just brand everybody in the Middle East as being just Arab. The amount of times when you're having a discussion and people would turn around to the areas of Iraq, Iran, and various other spots and just go, oh, well, they were all just full of Arabs, aren't they? In fact, they're not. There's a lot of various different ethnic groups that exist in those regions. But with the rise of Muhammad around 651 and pushing into those Persian territories, it creates a massive rivalship between Persia and the Arabs, which even exists today. Like a lot of fighting that's happening in this region um, is still very reflective of the fighting between the Arabs and the Persians. that exists and has its foundation around the early medieval period. But it did catch the Persians off guard when Muhammad rises and he starts smashing into those territories. The Persians didn't see it as very, as a threat at the very start because of the fact that their ultimate threat was actually the Byzantine Empire. At the very start of it, you would assume the Persians and the Byzantines would get on hand in hand and be there to fight off the various nomadic groups, such as the White Huns, for example. But in fact, that's not the case at all. When Muhammad is actually on the rise, in fact, the Persians and the Byzantine Empire are actually fighting amongst themselves in these big, massive battles against each other. And so when Muhammad does push into those territories, he catches them off guard. And Muhammad actually knows this. He knows that he can take full advantage of the Persians and even, in fact, take over, that whole entire territory and take over and monopolize the trade that's going between India to the Byzantine Empire. And it's very interesting because Muhammad himself, before he became the prophet, according to the Muslims today, he was actually a merchant himself, wasn't he, Mihal?
Believe so. I know more about his sort of group, the Hashemid, not Hashemids. Is it? Yeah, Hashemids. The were, and they were sort of stationed around Mecca.
Mm.
And he gets kicked out. And I will just ask quickly, Tom Core. Just I don't understand what you're trying to claim about Clan Galbraiths, but if you can clarify it a bit better for me, I can certainly weigh in. But yeah,
Mm.
obviously he's kicked out. I believe he gets for revelations and what actually his conquer. He obviously doesn't conquer the Sassanids. It's much later under the Umayyads, isn't it? It's his descendants.
Yeah.
It's his bro. I don't know. He's got. I know this is where the split happens, where his daughter Fatima marries a cousin, and through them you get the these Saeed lines of descent from Muhammad, and then you have the Umayyad who are still part of a wider king group. I think they descend from like an uncle or something of Muhammad, or a great uncle or something like that. So they are still part of the wider king group. They push up, and it's actually assassinate general who converts across to the cause um,
Mm.
um, that takes over the Sassanid, helps conquer the Sassanids. But I could be off slightly with Thailand. It may be Muhammad. Maybe I'm not giving him full credit for whatever he actually did, but he's not an area of an area I would really study that well. But what I do know, at least,
Mhm.
is that a lot of you were touching on there before about claiming descent, and then how families when the Muslim Caliphate was taking over and
Mm.
expanding. If you look at a lot of Somali tribes,
Yeah.
a lot of them go back to a lot of the big ones go back to Islamic travelers, merchants, leaders who came across the sea and settled in Somalia. But we can actually see that a lot of these are fabrications, and these families are have implanted these individuals into their trees
Mm.
to claim descent from a Muslim line, rather than their previous, Somali ancestors, whoever they may be. I think one of them is Sakir, is one of the main tribes of Somalia, and they have an individual who they claim descent from, who's you know it's pretty obvious that the tree doesn't really match up. Um, but if they claim it, they claim it. Who's the people believe it, people don't believe it. It's not for me to say. Um,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
I will just go. I wanted to do this one actually off topic, but who's your favorite modern Irish scholar?
My favorite one today.
Yeah,
Give me a second to take, because there's tons and tons and tons and tons I love reading. Most of the work, just because I'm actually quite biased towards the 10th century, I really like the 10th century, but One person I love reading about
Not
is
about
Claire
like.
Downham's work.
All right, yeah,
Yeah, Dr. Claire Downham's work is one
yeah.
I do enjoy reading. To be quite honest with you, it's not so much Claire Downham per se. I like her entire circle, even the academics that completely disagree with her. The moment I see Claire Downham's name being mentioned, even if it's a complete, oh, I disagree with Claire Downham because of A, B, and C, I get delight just because I love reading about the 10th century. So anytime I see Dr. Claire Downham, I'm like, oh, more stuff on the 10th century. One of my favorite scholars is definitely Claire Downham, just because I get to read more about the 10th century, to be quite honest with you, the peak of the Viking Age, which kind of brings us back into the conversation at hand, because actually Ireland is connected back into the Caliphate again, because while all this is going on, and we see the rise of Islam, and with you see the thing is that at first this kind of is a massive disadvantage to the Gael itself, because of the fact that we have so much positive connections to Coptic Christians when it comes down to that sort of trade and the Byzantine Empire. But because then our protection racket in Ireland, when you have the coming of the Vikings coming into those areas, the Vikings take over the protection racket in those areas. The Gael, the Irish Vikings, the men of Dublin, the men of Waterford, the men of Limerick, who were a mixture of both Scandinavians and native Irish, because they then take over the protection racket in those areas, against actually other Viking raiders going into the Irish Sea to cause plunder and raid. Because they take over the protection racket, they then connect themselves back into the Muslim world, and then we have all those connections back into the Mediterranean Sea. Because after the Caliphate has taken over Baghdad and those Persian territories and stuff, they then continue to further push up into North Africa. From North Africa, they push into the Iberian Peninsula. They sort of cut off our connection routes and our trade going into the Iberian Peninsula, and they themselves go into what was it called, into France, where at the Battle of Tours, the Frankish groups barely are able to push back against the Caliphate and pushing back into the Iberian Peninsula, and then Charlemagne further pushes them out of the northern parts of Spain. But once the Vikings, the Gaul Gael, have taken over and monopolised the protection racket around the Irish and Celtic Sea, we are then reconnected into the trade that's happening with the Caliphate. And it's at that point that you start to see, if you're ever into the movie the 13th, what was it, the 13th Warrior and stuff, you might be aware that you then see bards, educated members of the Muslim world, because Islam itself goes into the kind of Islam golden age of music, scholarly work, maths, all that sort of stuff starts to really boom in North Africa at that point, and all that influences go into Spain. And from there, once the Vikings had taken over, it fully connects us into all that trade and movement and into the Silk Road. And it's at that point you'll see actually coins start to appear in Dublin with Muslim writing. There's this, it's something I completely disagree with. There's this idea then that the Vikings converted to Islam, but there's no evidence I found of any, like, there's not even like any jewelry of Muslim or anything to do with that inside of Ireland. I haven't come across anything, because, in my opinion, like, you do find crosses, Christian crosses and stuff, found in places like Dublin and also in Iceland and stuff. So I do believe that the Vikings did convert to Christianity, but I haven't come across any evidence of the any Vikings, both Scandinavian and Gaul Gael Irish Vikings, converting to Islam. I don't know if you have any opinion about that, but they were definitely trading with the Caliphate and had good relationship with the Caliphate Muslims and stuff when they weren't raiding them and robbing their women. They did have a good relationship when it comes down to the trade that's going on there. So once again, that kind of connects us back into Persia and everything that's happening there. So that's another very strong connection Ireland has with Persia and the Caliphate when it comes down to the 9th and 10th century.
Interesting. I'm
So
just gonna I'm just
go
gonna
on.
add. No, no, it's just I asked Tom to just clarify earlier about
Mm,
his first things first. Googler King. Paul McCutter is my favorite.
mm.
Uh, his work on clans and tours and trigger cats. He's done some amazing work.
Mm.
He will always be. He is anything he produces. I will buy it like a fanboy. Um, um, Tom, right now the Clan Galbraith Association in the United States thinks that the majority of M269 Galbraith are original group, family group, and that the M223 Bryson it helped Galbraith, the outliers. I think what you're trying to say, but I will, I'm not quite sure, but I think what I don't know what you're trying to imply. Obviously, there seems to be a dispute between the Galbraiths and certain genetic groups, and what is the main line, and forcing other lines to become outliers or be. But you're both wrong if you both disagree with that because all surnames are multi-origin. All surnames. We don't, as I've stated many times in this particular, we don't all descend from a single individual. Um, the small cluster of the noble line probably did have a better claim to being descended from this individual. But even then, we've already discussed many families forged the genealogies for political maneuverability, for so propaganda, for all these sort of reasons. So it's very hard to sort of you've got to take them as tradition rather than fact when it comes to origin stories of a family. So
Mm.
and even then, how people adopt the name. So I wouldn't get so pent up with that sort of argument if people want to debate it so much.
Mm.
Especially if it's like a family like Galbraith. A lot of Scottish families lost a lot of their actual records. It was quite common to burn each other's family records.
Jesus
Um,
Christ.
yeah, it was just easier than so they didn't have to go to courts or anything. If you just burnt the castle down, burnt the records, and then you could just claim whatever because you got your records.
Mm.
So and going back to our previous thing about people with Persians. By the way, I served in Afghanistan. Yeah, I served in Afghanistan too. With a Marine who's highly respected, and he made sure everyone knew he was a Persian descent. Yeah, I mean, the Tajiks in Afghanistan, most Afghanistan groups have Iranian ancestry. Tajiks, Hazaris, Pashtuns even do, Baluchis or Baluch, Azmiks. There's a lot of Iranian descent. Now, a lot of them more mixed than others. I think the Tajiks are probably the um, more pro Iranian sort of side of it. Um, but yeah, you can even see where they all exist in the wider world of yeah.
Yeah, I was about to move on there to once you get up to about the 11th century, then you have so as we were saying there, we have the Caliphate moving in there, taking over Persia and stuff, and then eventually the Persians managed to fight for their independence once again. So then you see there that's Persia around the 11th century breaking away from the Caliphate, basically the Arabs. It's interesting because the Persians today are Muslims. There's always a kind of debate and argument if they're secretly still worshipping the old gods behind locked doors and stuff. But it's very interesting that at times, especially very radical Islam, and it's a debate that's even happening today, is how Muslim are the Persians, you know, because a lot of people see if Persia was more independent, would they be more liberal? You know, and you know you definitely see that fighting in the 11th century, where the Caliphate is more kind of more radical Islam, and then you have the Persians, and this is obviously them in the 11th century, who are more kind of liberal in their ideas and stuff. We always think of the beautiful Persian dancers and stuff, compared to the Arabs, who are more kind of strict when it comes down to the treatment of women. so on and so forth. So it's quite interesting that this is once again the peak of the fighting that's happening in the 11th century. Until we see the arrival of the Seljuk Turks. You can see the Seljuk Turks starting to appear up there. And then as we go into the 12th century, the Seljuk Turks move in and once again occupy and dominate, what was it called? The poor Persians. So just as they were getting back their independence away from the Arabs, the Seljuk Turks quickly appear from this direction and dominate the region once again. Um, Anything you'd like to add into that, Mihal?
Uh, no, I mean, let me go back to the screen. No, not really. I mean, you can't touch. We could obviously we kind of touched on, that modern Iran would become Shia,
Mm,
and then you've got the opposite, who would be Sunni. But I mean, there's a lot of groups. There's a lot of what do you call it? You've got the Alawites, you've got the Druze, you've got the Yazidi, you've got the um, uh, oh god, there's so many denominations of Islam, and some are more adherent to strict adherence to the Quran and the Hadiths, and some don't even ignore the Hadiths and stick to the Quran. And it would just depend on uh, you know the leader's sort of interpretation. We can see it even today with Saudi Arabia. With their interpretation, um, they have their own denomination of Islam. It's a denomination of Sunni, but it's completely different to the rest of the Muslim world. Um,
mm.
so and but Christianity is exactly the same. Presbyterian, Catholic. Can't believe it's not the real Catholics. Orthodoxy. It's just crazy. So
Mm.
I should have just said. If I'd been speaking to someone in Northern Ireland, I'd have probably gone, "You've got Catholic and then you've got wrong," but I'm not religious, and people might
Well,
misinterpret.
yeah, that's very, very true. It is either Catholic or it's wrong. It's no two ways about it from my perspective, for
Uh,
sure.
I know some Orthodox people who'll be straight in here. uh,
Submit to Rome. That's all
Submit to Constantinople or Moscow.
Oh, because it's the same thing with this whole Sunni and Shiite thing. I am aware of it, obviously, and I've this parts where I have done further study. The Persians are Sunni, aren't they?
No, Shia.
The Shiite, aye. And it's the Arabs then that are Sunni. So is it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. It's
I,
very
it,
interesting. Go
it
on.
breaks down effectively. I mean, obviously, again, you've got 12 verse Shia. You've got so many little breakdowns, and they obviously have the different differentiation. But ultimately, I think from what I could tell as a non-Islamic scholar,
Mm,
outsider looking in, it kind of breaks down. It breaks down to who was Muhammad's successor, and the Umayyad Caliphate, their ancestor, who, like I said, I believe is related distantly, um, uh, um, was the chosen successor of Muhammad, and the Shias would be more his actual bloodline descendants through Fatima and his cousin's marriage to Fatima, their
mm,
descendants, and they would actually rule Egypt for a while, the Fatimid dynasty. There's a couple of other smaller dynasties that would end up around. Um, and surprisingly, it wasn't about being related to Muhammad that the Sunnis were worried about. Yet many of them now today, in the legitimacy in the medieval period and later, would then claim Sayyid bloodline. Sayyid means, that could be a mispronunciation. Sayyid means
mm,
descendant of the Prophet. So they were, for someone that wasn't really that bothered about being descended, for the claim, suddenly it became quite popular to become descended from from him, like, just to legitimize your rule. And I believe most kings and rulers of modern day Islamic countries, do sort of claim some descent. Most of them do, uh, but yeah, there was Shia. So and surprisingly, one of the very few Shia countries. So and
It's
they are still today, I believe.
Yeah, it's interesting that you turned around and said that there was a lot of Muslim countries that see direct lineage from Muhammad, because it's from this point onwards, especially with the Seljuk Turks, that a lot of people then claim that they were descended from Seljuk. And then you have the Mongolians. The Mongolians come in. The Mongolians do exactly what the Seljuk Turks had done before them, moving in around the 13th century, between 1219 to 1221, when they move in there and they capture Persia. Originally, they wanted Persia to submit to their, the Mongolians were going over, taking over Asia, and they were once again monopolizing the protection racket that was happening from India over to the Byzantine Empire, or even from what was it called, Beijing, all the way over to Constantinople and also over to Poland as well. So the Mongolians, compared to the the Seljuk Turks, who were mostly focused on the trade route going from the Byzantine Empire to India, the Mongolians wanted it all. They were fully monopolizing the entire network of the what was it, the Silk Road. Some areas insanely successful, of course, Poland to Beijing, where they were the most successful. What was it called? India to Byzantine Empire, insanely super bloody. What happened here is that the went into Persia at first, offered them a whole load of gifts if they would accept their protection racket, and then just give tribute to them to make sure the wagons were protected. Persians did not accept it. They actually killed merchants, Mongolian merchants. They went off and killed them. They kind of, as a kind of fu to the Mongolians. Mongolians didn't take it very well, so they went in there, broke into their settlements, most famously in Baghdad, and just wiped them. You know, chopped as many as possible, as many as they could get a hold of, and chopped them up good, and then took over the connection between India to the Byzantine Empire. But it's interesting because, going back to what you were saying, all their descendants from there on said that they were related to not only Muhammad but also to the Seljuk Turks, Seljuk dynasty, and also from that point onwards, all claiming they were Khan as well. Like, they literally changed. Before that, they were, taking on various Arab titles and stuff. From that point onwards, they said that they were the Khan. I am the new Khan. Once they had taken over a good chunk of territory within Persia. And it's interesting because, continuing the conversation, once the Tartars had taken over as well, they started doing the same thing as well, all claiming that they were related to Timur. Once Timur had also appeared from the Tartars and taken over these territories as well, also claimed descended from him. So it's interesting that once leaders had risen up, that they had claimed that they were related to Muhammad, to the Seljuk Turks, to Genghis Khan, to Timur. That you have to have all these descendants before you could be even in the conversation. So
But I
once
believe
again, it
Timur also claimed descent from
Yeah,
Genghis
he did the
Khan.
same
Yeah,
thing as well.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That you had to be in the conversation after the 15th century. You had to, claim descendants from all these blasted people. So you do wonder, if you were warlord and you suddenly became very, very successful taking these territories, how many had rewritten their own history to put themselves into the dynasty, the royal dynasty, and be taken seriously, as a warlord in these
I,
areas.
I wonder which little island in the middle of the Atlantic we've seen that happen a lot of times.
Doesn't happen in Ireland. I don't know what you're talking about. That definitely does not happen in Ireland.
Everyone is
All related on the 100 battles.
yeah, that's it. One guy who just did a hell of a lot of riding. No, I mean, but it's interesting that along the Silk Road, along Persia, where we have these correlations, we have similar mythological stories, we have similar interactions with the people of the steppes. We propagate lineage the same way. We there's just a lot of core. It doesn't even just have to be Persia, but just for the topic of what we were talking about today,
Mm,
um, there's a lot of similarities in the way we operate. Yet we're effectively at opposite ends of the known world at this time.
mm.
Um, you know, well, not so much but in the early medieval period anyway. We're at both ends of the known world, um, and you know, there's still things that individuals, if they were to step forward in Persia or step forward in Ireland, that they would see similarities. They probably wouldn't understand them because they can't understand each other. But if they took a second to take a knee and have a look, they probably would see it. Um, uh, oh
Which one are you looking at in particular? Because there's two.
Tom and Kevin are on mad ones tonight.
Uh,
No, it's um I don't want to, I because I might have missed half the conversation, so I'm just I'm not getting involved.
do
I
you
just
have any comments over in the old Tickety Talk or Instagram or anything?
No, no, I'm not speaking on Instagram. Yeah, just do you know anything about Spanish last names origins? I do not, apart from the ones that are Irish. A lot of Irish families moved across flights after the flight of the Earls, became wild geese. A lot of them were given noble titles like the O'Donnells. Um, but I know we have similar names for like Moran. Moran's a Spanish name as well as an Irish name. But I wouldn't know many. And I wouldn't know how they formulate in the same way that Irish surnames do. Um, Excuse me. Um, Irish exits. Okay. No, so that's it. Some people disagreeing with folk punk about Milesians being great guys.
So it seems
uh,
like most of our connection when it comes down to Persia and the Silk Road going from India to the Byzantine Empire and Africa, it seems most of our connection comes from more of the ancient and early medieval period. It seems to be once the what was it called? Once we go into the High Middle Ages, we seem to not really see the same connection of trade happening in those regions and stuff. And it seems to be that once we go into the late medieval period, we seem to follow the trend of Spain. How Spain disconnects itself very violently through conquest, the old Reconquista and all that kind of stuff. That's where we kind of disconnect ourselves from the Caliphate. And once we kind of disconnect ourselves from the Caliphate, we don't have the same movement going from Persia over to Ireland. So if you're looking for connections from Persia, modern day Iran, to Ireland, I would definitely look into the early medieval period, going from the very start of it, where you have the Saracens. Sorry, no, not the Saracens, the blasted Persians in the early medieval period, especially the even pushing back still further the old fashioned um, connections we have with the Scythia coming in as nomads. We seem to be more connected to the blasted nomads than the Persians themselves. But regardless, definitely the nomad connection of the nomads passing around and then going into North Africa, and also the Bell Beaker people connections and stuff. And then later on as well, where we have the Galatians moving into modern day Turkey and all those connections up around there. So we definitely have a lot of ancient connections and also connections going into the early medieval period, especially once the Caliphate connects it all the way from Baghdad into North Africa and then up to the Iberian Peninsula. And then from there, connecting them to the kind of Gaul Gael Irish Viking connections into Dublin. But once we get into the High Middle Ages and we're connected to the kind of old French Norman world, we don't seem to be as connected as we were previously, especially since we get more connected with our Spanish allies in Spain as they start to do the old Reconquista. So we don't really see the same connection between Ireland and Persia that we've seen in the early medieval period.
no, I agree. It's far more disconnected. There's far more intermediaries like Venice, like Genoa, like Constantinople, like I would say, if anything, we sort of become more North Africa orientated in our links with the Muslim world,
Mm.
rather than direct trade, through Spain, through those sort of links, and proximity. But even then, it's through multiple intermediaries. We know that the Irish are trading, fishing. The O'Donnells are known for fishing. We know we have links with, later on, supposed connections to the Berber pirates. There's supposedly wheelings and dealings going on with them. Um, uh, uh, so there's a long connection, but by the sort of High Middle Ages, to be fair, it's kind of Constantinople, the Eastern Roman Empire does a really strict job of trying to control what comes through from
Yeah.
across from modern day Turkey. Uh, so and the Irish aren't really in a position. That's such luxurious wealth to have something imported from that sort of distance. Um, and Ireland really is kind of poor. In compared
Mm,
to, no, no,
it's more of a roller
no,
coaster.
no, no, compared to Irish lords, are in the High Middle Ages, our native Irish lords are poorer compared to what I would consider your European lords, so your Dukes of Normandy, your we don't have the we don't ha- we're not the same we don't have the same wealth to invest in large
It's
quantities of something that would be still quite hard for French nobility to acquire without
mm.
their connections to Venice or Genoa. I'm not saying we don't have it. It's just not. It wouldn't be in the
Well,
quantities.
the Cross of Con would be a very good example of movement going from the Middle East over to Ireland. So we're still getting various finds and stuff that you can see in the National Museum, especially with the Crusades and stuff. So I wouldn't completely be dismissive of that sort of stuff completely, especially when Ireland is connected to the Crusades, especially throughout the whole, because even later on, then you still have princes such as Aid O'Connor, who goes on crusade. I think he goes on the sixth or the seventh crusade. So I wouldn't be completely dismissive of movement, but at the same time, like Ireland isn't rich in the High Middle Ages, especially when we're fighting a war against both Norman lords and against English forces as well, as you can see there in 1251, up to around the 1265, around that point, where you see heavy fighting between Irish and English forces in Ireland. So I
Yeah.
do agree that Ireland isn't at its peak wealth, but it's more kind of a roller coaster than a bunch of Irish people eating a bunch of potatoes in a
Oh
vanilla
no,
bog
I
land.
like I say, our lords are still. The O'Donnells build a palace, for heaven's sake. Up
Mm,
in Donegal, which is, you wouldn't consider to be a wealthy part of Ireland. They have quite a monopoly of fishing. But again, it's like our True Cross of Con. I wasn't the
mm,
True Cross piece of True Cross sent from Rome. It was sent.
yeah.
So I mean, again, it's not like, and I know we have links to the Crusades and stuff like this, but links to the Crusades and gathering wealth through warfare, and links through gathering wealth, or items of wealth through trade, are two totally different things.
Mm,
Even the
yeah.
poorest man could go to Jerusalem and come back a wealthy man, or vice or he can leave a wealthy duke and have to ransom his whole dukedom to get himself out of prison. Um, you know,
Mm,
uh, but the trading monopoly isn't, like I say, like you've stated there. We're just not. It's not that we're just not in a position to spend our wealth on luxuries when probably our gallo glass payments are due at the end of the month, to keep the
Mm.
English at bay a wee bit longer, or our cousins, because I don't want to always propagate that state that the English are always the bad guys. The O'Donnells or the O'Briens could easily be the bad guys over the other side of the hill, to another Irish family.
That's it. But yeah, we'll start finishing up there. It was definitely a very, very interesting conversation today, and definitely sees Ireland as part of the wider world, especially during the early medieval period, as we were saying early on. Mihal, is there anything else you'd like to say before we start to finish up there? Any questions to do with families over on the tickety talk and all that?
No, just I know we've spoken in some of my comment sections. I can't think of the Donalds of the Don Raja, who they are. I know the MacDonalds who would move into Antrim, from Scotland, and take over Dunluce Castle, and would take over Bissett territory, in the Glens. But I'm not aware off the top of my head of a Donald. So if you've got information on them, please share that in our previous conversation. That'd be nice. Free poor but free milk and basic brown hospitality. I again
Wow.
we weren't poor. We were poorer than some of the wealthier nobles of Europe, is what I was saying. We weren't poor, as in we weren't our lords weren't scrubbing, you know, basins for extra dollars. Like, they still had wealth in
It's
comparison. Um,
Yeah,
but it,
it's very debatable because sometimes lords in Ireland become insanely wealthy. You go down to Waterford, you have literally garments made of gold, and then on top of that as well, you've got the construction of like the likes of Blarney Castle, Burnratty Castle. Definitely in the 15th century, Irish lords were super rich. It's a massive privilege. You have huge lords such as the O'Briens and stuff going on pilgrimage to Rome. So it depends on the area. It depends on what trade routes they're dominating, what resources they're dominating. So it is. I would say it's more of a roller coaster. As an up and down, depending on the situation, what's going on and stuff. High Middle Ages, I wouldn't say Ireland is at peak of wealth for sure, compared to what you see in the 15th century or in the 10th century. But it's like everything else; it's a pure roller coaster, and it depends on what circumstances are happening. There was a very good comment early on asking about the Black Irish, which in Irish is the Far Gorum. You do have the Berbers, as we were saying there, the Moors and the Berbers popping up from North Africa and the Iberian Peninsula, and from merchants coming in that area to mess around with local girls, and children being born out of it, to the Berbers and the Moorish pirates, physically doing harm to women as well, and also children being born out of that. You have various children referred to as the Black Irish, the Far Gorum. So that's what's going on there. And obviously, it was a case of tick for tat. If the Barbers and the Moorish went in there and did damage to locals, vice versa, Irish pirates had to be seen taking revenge on Barber and Moorish pirates because it undermined the society. People were paying for protection rackets. They wanted protection. So the Irish clans had to be seen going out there. Irish pirates had to be seen going out there and attacking Berber and Moorish pirates. So we have a whole load of that going on. You often get asked, I often get asked, when does the Viking Age end? And if you're looking at, when does piracy end? So, throughout the entirety of the Irish medieval world, you have piracy being a huge part of our culture. The old clans going out there and committing raids, both cattle raiding on land, and then just going out there and committing piracy up in the open seas, which we don't cover enough, and we should. Especially when we have huge piracy culture inside of Ireland. And it's pretty awesome. It's really, really awesome to study for sure. We also have people trying to get into the deep, horrible topic that is the Holy Roman Empire. Somebody turned around and says, the Holy Roman Empire, neither holy nor Roman nor empire. And I was like, oh, Jesus. These that conversation gets quite bloody online. So you guys digging holes inside of the comment section. I would be in favor of the Holy Roman Empire. I think the Holy Roman Empire is pretty awesome, especially its banking history. And if you look at the likes of the Lance Canette and the Gothic armor and stuff, so I'd be a huge fan of the Holy Roman Empire. To be honest with you, Mihal, what's your interpretation of the Holy Roman Empire?
um, far too complicated for me. Right, like it honestly, again, I kind of agree with neither, no, not holy, not Roman, not empire, but I also apply that to a lot of other empires. I'm not just saying it. I think the parameters to meet all three of those things are very loose and
True.
and used and abused by many empires and kingdoms. Yeah, um, uh, I kind of agree with that sentiment, but probably the empires they're referring to that maybe that are, I don't agree with them either. So
Yeah, true, true. It's a conversation we could definitely have all night. And since we only have 5 minutes left, I don't think we can get into the peak of that conversation for sure. Any other comments or anything else you want to delve into before we start to finish up, Miho?
no, I noticed someone stated there's a number of curtains that were probably fathered by Moorish pirates. One of them, a famous curtains, even has the sort of J haplogroup.
Mm,
Obviously, I'm guessing he's on about the curtains of Thomond, maybe. I
mm,
don't know. There's a couple of branches. There's one up in Ulster too. Um, I will look forward to looking into that because I've never actually seen that link before.
mm,
Um, you know, that I know that the J sort of haplogroup is associated with the Near East, and it's also found in parts of like Southern Europe, I believe, because of the interactions that happen between there.
mm,
Um,
mm,
but I do, as far as I'm aware, though, whenever it comes to haplogroups and especially like J, we've got to be very careful not to attribute it to one specific era in time because there's been migration backwards and forwards since
mm.
Neolithic farmers. So, but it would be a very interesting
Yeah, for
to
sure.
look into that.
Okay, so we'll start to finish up there. Mihal, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And hopefully, Owen will be back with us next week as we delve in deeper to various different topics. And of course, continuously talking about the various clans and dynasties in Ireland as well. Um, Mihal, do you have any plans for this week? I know over in my channel, tomorrow I'm going to be over on my Patreon and I'll be talking about Brian O'Neill's revolt from around the 1250s into the 1260s. Basically, the fighting to do with the English and Irish forces as the English push in to try to take more territory in Ireland. So, if you're into that kind of stuff, fighting in the 13th century in Ireland between the English and the Irish, definitely head on over to my Patreon and subscribe there. It's only 20 quid a month, and every Sunday we cover another presentation on Irish medieval history. Um, Mihal, any plans for this week?
Yeah, so obviously I've been ill for the last few weeks with a variation of what I don't know what it was.
Oh.
Probably the Black Death.
Not
Um,
bad, is it?
so yeah, it was that bad. Well,
Oh,
yeah, so I'm feeling better now. I was sort of thought I was feeling better last week, and I sort of
mm,
crumbled again. I but I will be back to my shorts again, and then hopefully with a bit of routine, we can get back to our lives again very
mm.
soon. When I say get back to our lives, I mean the lives that I owe my subscribers.
Uh,
um, uh, but until then, I will be going back to her. So new video will be out tomorrow. Short again, new short will be out tomorrow. So prepare for that one.
happy days. Okay, thanks very much, lad, and slán go bhfuil. Bye.
Shalom.